I love Patricia Briggs. I love the Percy Jackson. Girl. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Dominique, but I go by Dom, and in today's video, we're going over my favorite reads of 2024. Some of these books you would have already seen on my channel. I actually had no intention of filming this video. I decided to do this last night. As you can see, there has been an extended break on my channel, not on purpose. Definitely not on purpose. I haven't been filming. I actually had content filmed since December, ready to go up, and then when I looked at it, I said, this is not up to my standard, so we scrapped it. It seemed boring to me, so yeah, I didn't want to have to subject you guys to that. So here we are, a few weeks into the New Year's, because we're definitely into full swing of the new year, and I say all that to say, I hope you guys have all been well. But yeah, let's kind of just jump right into it. If you've been here since the beginning of my channel, you'll know that I've never really specified what types of genres of books that I'd like to read, and there's a reason for that. And it's because I'm a mood reader and I read whatever the heck I feel like. I don't want to tie myself down to any particular genre. So with that being said, I didn't actually pre-plan this video, so I do apologize in advance if it's a little bit all over the place, but I do believe I have 10 books that I would like to talk about today. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then I have 10. So yes, there's 10 books that I would like to talk about today. We're not doing this in any particular order, so let's just jump right into it. So first, we're starting off with one of the books that I read most recently and one of the last books that I read for 2024, and that is Dread Nation by Christina. But you know what? We're just gonna go with, I made a mistake because, you know, J and K are very like, so we have Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. I think, I did say that this was in no particular order, but I actually do think that this was my favorite book of the entire year. And I think that's because I didn't really know what to expect. The synopsis is very, very short. Maybe it's not giving too much away. But anyways, this is a duology. I did mention this in my most previous video. I do have the second book, which I do intend to read in the month of February, and I'm super excited to get to it, because what are we doing this year? Say it with me. We're completing series. Yeah. So enough of me rambling. Okay, so this book is set in an alternative version of what would be considered the Reconstruction era of America. So post Civil War. In this book, out of nowhere, the undead kind of rise up and start to walk the earth. Very like post-apocalyptic type vibes. This story follows Jane McKinney. Jane McKinney is a young Black woman. She is sent to a combat school for Black girls to be trained in the art of killing zombies. If you are a fan of The Walking Dead, I think that you would enjoy this book. And I say that because as I was reading it, that's all that kept coming to mind is The Walking Dead. Obviously, but historical fiction? This falls under the category of historical fantasy, if I am not mistaken. I don't want to obviously give too much away. The synopsis on the back of this book is very short, but you kind of get the premise of what this book is about. It is about 450 pages long. Am I right? Yeah. It's about 450 pages long, so it's definitely building the world for you. You get an idea of who Jane is. She is strong, but she's very stubborn, very kind of like set in their ways. But I love books that don't shy away from female main characters standing in who they are. I really, really enjoy, I think because of like the zombie aspect, but then you have the historical aspect. I loved how Justina Ireland was able to tie those two things together. It's everything that I just wasn't expecting. If you are into violence and gory details, this had a lot of that. It was there was a lot of violence, but I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I'd recommend this book to anybody who's into zombies, post-apocalyptic type of fiction, historical fiction, The Walking Dead. fantasy, then you definitely will want to get into this for sure. This book is no stranger to my channel. I talked about it in length in my thrillers video. This one in particular is a YA thriller, and it's the first of its kind from Riordan Presents, and it is It Waits in the Forest by Sarah Das. You guys know I'm obsessed with this cover. I love this book. Like, I really, really enjoyed this book. I think that this would fall under maybe new YA. Is that what the category would be called for like people who are a little bit older? I think that this would fall under there. This book takes place on an island, on the island of St. Virgil, and it follows the female main character, and her name is Selena da Silva. She essentially is considered the island witch. She's not liked by the locals because of her mother and her father, who've essentially set a specific type of reputation. Her mother was the local and very powerful, what you'd consider witch of her time. A very tragic incident happened which leads to her father's death. If I'm not mistaken, was he the chief of police? No, but he was like a very popular like homicide detective, if I'm not mistaken. I read this a couple months ago, so I don't actually remember. So a string of murders start happening on the island. Selena is implicated in some way, and she and an ex-boyfriend who comes back to the island, they work together to get down to the bottom of what is happening, the string of murders, the supernatural implications, and things of that nature. Like I mentioned before, if you are into Afro-Caribbean folklore or Afro-Caribbean spirituality, then you'll definitely want to get into this book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. This book definitely had me on the edge of my seat. If you are easily spooked, I don't know if this is for you. It's not scary in like the gory, gruesome details. Sarah Das does an amazing job of depicting certain things for you to get a picture in your mind. She does a really great job of that. I would love to see this as like a series or like a movie, TV movie. I don't even care, but I would love to see this on a screen. But it's the supernatural parts. That's kind of like what had the hair standing up on the back of my neck. But yes, I don't necessarily care for rating systems, but for y'all, you know, I loved it. I liked it. I didn't like it. Not necessarily I hated it, but you get it. I love this book, just like I loved Dread Nation. I would rate this a 5 out of 5 stars, in my opinion. And so now we have some fantasy, both by the same author. We have Soul Taken by Patricia Briggs, and then we have Winter Lost by Patricia Briggs. I read this at the top of the year. This actually came out in the fall of 2023. This is one of the long-standing series that I mentioned in my previous video that I said that I wouldn't talk about, and I think I've mentioned this series quite a bit. The reason why I haven't made a video on this series as of yet is because I don't know how I would like to format it, and I don't know what it's supposed to look like. So yes, bear with me. I will probably talk about it eventually, but this is book 13 and this is book 14. So this is the most recent release. This series does need to be read in order for you to follow along with the story, in my opinion. These two in particular, what happens in this is essentially it kind of bleeds over into Mercy's behavior in this book. I loved this. I loved this book. I'm like, how do I talk about this without getting into the universe?
Jump here.
Nobody's fooled by my appearance, right? I did such a terrible job. I realized that I was doing such a terrible job trying to explain the Mercy Thompson universe. And I realized that if I'm talking about books within this series, and we're well into this series, guys, I can't talk about them because I'm going to be mentioning names and then you're not going to know who the heck I'm talking about. So here we are. Okay, so brief breakdown on the Mercy Thompson universe, because I don't know what that was before. So Mercy Thompson is a coyote shape-shifting Volkswagen mechanic. She lives in the Tri-Cities, which would be like the Washington, D.C. area, if I'm not mistaken. And she is married to the alpha of the Columbia Basin Werewolf Pack. At some point throughout this series, I think it's like book 8 or 9, Mercy declares the entire Tri-Cities as the Pack's territory. If you watch Star Trek, the Tri-Cities is essentially the neutral zone. It's meant to be an area safe for all, including magical creatures. In this universe, The werewolf packs are governed by Bran Cornick, the Morocco. He's essentially the head of all the werewolves. He doesn't like the title. He claims that he only governs the werewolves in America, but we know that that's not true. If you actually read the series, you know he's a very powerful werewolf. Based on the pack's declaration over the Tri-Cities, essentially he has had to cut ties with the pack. So they're essentially a lone pack. You know, he had to do that due to like werewolf politics, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Mercy happens to be friends with some very important people in like each section of the magical community. So you have gremlins, you have vampires, you have fae, you have the werewolves. So to give you an idea, she was once a part of Bran's pack, who he considers her like a daughter. We have that. And then lastly, she's friends with a vampire by the name of Stefan. Stefan and her have a very unique bond. Stefan is... Who is Stefan in this story? Stefan is the right hand to the mistress of the local vampire seed. The mistress, she's the head of the vampire seed. Next to Stefan, you also have Wolf. Wolf is the other hand. So her two right hands. You have Stefan and then you have Wolf. Wolf is also another very powerful and ancient vampire like Marsilia and like Stefan. So between the three of them, they're a pretty dangerous trio. All three of them were essentially like right hands to the head of all vampires. His name is Bonarata. He's not, I guess he is a part of the Soul Taken. So now that I'm done with explaining the universe, now I can mention names. There were a lot of people that I left out, but I think that I talked about all of the people that I needed to for the moment. And I hope that this clip was clear and concise because I'd hate to have to do it again. Anyways, so before I get into that, each one of Patricia's books, every magical sanction technically are the people within the communities. And I'm using the word sanction because you have, like I said, you have the fays, you have the goblins, you have the vampires, you have the werewolves. That's the sanctions. That's what I mean. Each book I find revolves around one of the groups. This one in particular surrounds the vampires, and it's not to say that the others are not involved as well, but there typically is a main focal point surrounding one of these groups. So in this story, Wolf goes missing, and Marsilia, who's the mistress of the seed, she essentially enlists Mercy and the pack to find out what happened to Wolf. Like, where did he go? Where did he disappear? In the midst of the pack trying to track down Wolf, it's so funny that his name is Wolf, but it's spelled W-U-L-F-E. So there's no confusion when you're reading the book. But in the midst of them trying to track down Wolf, they realize that all of the vampires of the local seed have disappeared. All of them are missing. The way that Marsilia ends up enlisting Mercy is through like a premonition almost. It was with vampire magic. So she didn't realize that they were missing, but Marsilia doesn't like Mercy, and that's the first time she's ever tried to like communicate with her in that way. So you immediately know that something is not right. On top of all of that, there seems to be a serial killer, and it seems like only the magical creatures are the targets. That's obviously an issue because Mercy and her pack are the ones who are supposed to be governing the Tri-Cities, and it's starting to appear like, hey, can you guys handle this job? Are you actually doing your job? You know what I mean? So this is why they have to get down to the bottom of all of what's happening. I really, really enjoyed this. In this book, you get the origin story of Wolf, Marsilia, and Stefan. This is book 13. In all of the books, we've gotten glimpses into their world, but we haven't gotten this much. So I think that's what I like most about it. And yeah, if you are into this series, then you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, get into it. My mic is dying, but I already talked about Winterlost in the clip to come, so I'm not gonna talk about that again because I think I did a pretty decent-ish job talking about it. So let's get back to regular scheduled programming. I love the artwork. I love the artwork of these books. Anyway, in Winterlost, you're following almost like the repercussions of some of the choices that Mercy had to make in book 13. In this book, Mercy ends up looking for this magical artifact, which is like a lyre, and she has to find this and return it to a frost giant who is a fae in order to save the life of her brother and essentially stop Ragnarok from happening. Yeah. That's like the quickest and easiest way for me to kind of like sum this up. Her and Adam go on an adventure in this book. You don't get too much of what's happening. I feel like you don't get too much of dialogue from the pack. I'm sure I did, like I said, a poor job of talking about it, but that's what this book is about. It's book number 14. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I listened to it on audio, so I haven't physically read it yet, but this will be one of the books that I read this year and will be going towards my 52 goal. Okay, this counts. If you do, you agree with me? Are rereads? Do you count rereads in your reading goal? Do you? Then, of course, we have Indigo by Beverly Jenkins. I've mentioned this before. This is one of the first historical romances that I read, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Shout out to Shelby and the book club for mentioning this and even putting it on my radar. This book follows Hester Wyatt and Galen Vachon. Both Hester and Galen Vachon are conductors on the Underground Railroad. He's a famous conductor that goes by the name of Black Daniel. In the midst of rescuing and bringing some slaves to the north, he gets caught up in an altercation where he is beaten almost half to death. He is put under the care of Hester, who essentially has to nurse him back to health. And of course, you get how their love story would start. In the midst of that, he lets Hester know, hey, there is a traitor in your midst, because nobody should have known his whereabouts. How the heck how was he even ambushed? Because essentially that's what ends up happening. And I won't say too much, but their love story it's so good. Beverly Jenkins, I don't think I mentioned this. This book is very spicy. And I wasn't expecting that. I said, oh, well. Hester Wyatt is an ex-slave who, under the care of her aunt Catherine, becomes a conductor on the Underground Railroad. And there's so many different elements to this story, but if you want to read a story where a Black woman is loved well, you need to get into this. This was so good. Get you a Galen Vachon. That's what Shelby said. And I have to concur. Get you a Galen. I want a Galen. I want a Galen. Yeah, he never really took no for an answer in his pursuit of her. And I'm glad that he didn't. Their love story is it's just so pure. I don't know. I really enjoyed this story. If you are into historical fiction, I've talked about this in length in my other videos. No, one other video, and it was like a vlog, and I don't necessarily think that vlogs do well on my channel, but there was a pretty in-depth review on my feelings about this book. I really enjoyed it. This was a 5 out of 5 read for me. I realized that I didn't rate the other ones, but there's no point. They're all 5-star reads for me if I'm talking about them in my favorites video. I don't care. But I really loved this book so much. Next, we have a very cute story that I really enjoyed. I read this in April, I believe, of 2024. And it caught me by surprise. It was an audiobook that I listened to, I just clicked in. I was like, whatever, you own the book, you should probably try to get through the books on your bookshelf. Getting to listen to this was just, I don't know, it was such a breath of fresh air. I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and that would be One True Loves by Elise Bryant. This book follows Lenore Bennett. She's getting ready to graduate high school. I think she ends up graduating high school in this book. It starts off with her at senior prom, experiencing like a devastating loss, like in her life, in her teenage life, which would be, and she's not worried about love. She's just trying to figure out her life. She winds up going on a family cruise, but she's given an ultimatum before going on the cruise because she's supposed to be going to NYU. She's told her parents that she's gotten into this program where she technically hasn't. She's essentially been like shortlisted or undeclared is what it would be. Ultimatum that she's given is that she needs to have it figured out by the end of the cruise, which is I think a 5 or 10 day cruise. I don't even remember the length of time, but her parents are expecting her to figure out what she is planning to choose, what her major is going to be in school. She's not going to go to school and just take general arts because that was the plan, and then she was just going to figure it out from there because she, I think, is interested in art, if I'm not mistaken, photography specifically. They're livid with her. They get so upset because they've instilled in her mind, you know, you're a black girl. You are a young black girl. You got to work hard. You guys know the story. I'm sure we've all heard it. You've got to work harder. You've got to excel because that's the only way for you to get noticed. And there's just something about this book. Everything within it resonated with me so much, and it really made me think about high school and like needing to have it all figured out as a teenager and you're not even legally allowed to drink. How insane is that? But you need to have your life figured out. So this book really hit home for me. You guys know I love YA. I think there's just something sentimental and also nostalgic. Nostalgia is not always a good thing, but there's just something sentimental and something so pure and like heartfelt about these types of stories, especially stories specifically speaking for myself with Black youth and the need for obviously the representation and all of those things. But anyways, I'm going on a tangent, but she ends up meeting a guy on the cruise, very unexpected. He is the son of a friend of the family or whatever, something along those lines. And they end up hitting it off. And he is somebody who has it all figured out. He has a 10-year plan. So they kind of like bump heads a lot, but he's trying to help her in figuring out and planning for the future. Obviously, they end up falling in love. You get it, right? Anyway, this book was so sweet. I really enjoyed it. I definitely would read it again. I would recommend it for anybody who has kids and you kind of want a buddy read, maybe with your children, or if you have a daughter or a son, whatever. That type of representation is so freaking important in stories. Thanks to these authors for that. And then what would this video be if I didn't talk this book to death? Yes, ma'am. We have Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. I don't know that I've mentioned this. I mean, I do read romance. I used to read only predominantly romance novels and erotica. I don't even think that genre exists anymore because I think it's just now all lumped together as romance. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't read a romance novel like this in a long time. First of all, there's so much that I didn't say. And I don't, there's no reason for me to talk about it now, but this was so well written. I can't recommend this book enough. I still haven't gotten around to reading This Could Be Us, but I will be reading it within this first quarter of the year for sure. And I would definitely recommend that you get into this. This is a trilogy. The final installment for this series does come out on May 13th, if I'm not mistaken. I'll pop it up on the screen. I've talked about it enough. But yes, did I say that I was talking about 9 books? 10 books. I said 10, right? The People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. It's one of the books that I don't own, but I did end up getting to listen to the audiobook because it was available at the library. And I feel like her books are like summer reads. Is it just me? But anyway, I really love that book. I really love that story. So The People We Meet on Vacation. This story follows Poppy Wright and Alex Nielsen. They're best friends. Obviously, it's a male and female best friend, but I do believe that I don't think that this book is dual perspective. Is it? I don't believe so. I can't actually remember. But anyway, she's a travel writer for like a popular magazine. So she's able to go on obviously these paid vacations to write about different things. And she usually brings Alex, who's her best friend, with her. They make it an annual thing where they get to see each other because I don't believe that they live in the same state. something happens, like a traumatic event happens. They kind of fall off. I think there's like a 2-year gap in between where this story progresses. So it goes back and forth. And in this story, you kind of follow the storyline of her retelling what happened and what led to the end of their friendship. And then also them trying to rekindle the friendship in present day. If you're not into stories like that, you may not like this story. I didn't find that it was that difficult to follow along, but I definitely enjoyed it. They end up rekindling because I believe she ends up just reaching out to him. I think his brother or his sister who's getting married in California. So she like creates this like devises a plan to essentially go to the same place that he's going to, paid for by work. It's not actually paid for by work, but she's convinced him that it is. So she's paying out of pocket for this trip. She's actually broke. She ain't got the money to do it. And they end up meeting, and things don't necessarily go how she's expecting, because she's expecting for things to be exactly how they were, and he can't seem to get over the incident that had transpired to the demise of their relationship or their friendship. Of course, one thing leads to another. They realize, obviously, that there's love there. And, so the story goes. It's a romance. It's a romantic comedy. So, yeah, I definitely really enjoyed that. At this point, I've read other Emily Henry books, but at the time when I read that, I hadn't. And I was like, oh, I'm really going to love this author. There's very rarely, I don't expect that every book that an author comes out with is going to be a hit for me. You guys know how much I love the Mercy Thompson series. There are books within that series that I don't care for, and there are books that are just like tried and true. My favorite book within that series is Night Broken. So, and that's book, I think 6 or 7. Whatever. I did enjoy it. I think it would make for a good summer read. If you are looking for something to read this summer, a romance to read this summer that's not too heavy, something light, it's fun, a decent plot, then you'll enjoy it for sure. If you don't know who I'm going to talk about next, do you even belong here? I'm kidding. All are welcome. I promise. I love you all. Okay? I promise. But my man, Samuel Anthony, I'm kidding. That is not his name, guys. Like, his name is not Samuel Anthony. But in my heart of hearts, like I said in the family group chat, that's his name for me. But his name is S.A Cosby, aka Samuel Anthony. But it's actually Sean Andre. I really got to stop it. I'm not even trying to be disrespectful, but because you guys know how much I do enjoy. These are the 2 books that I read by him. This year I was introduced to his books, and I'm a forever fan. Okay? I don't even like the word fan, but I'm a forever fan. All the Cylinders Bleed was the first book that I read by him. Thoroughly enjoyed. I've mentioned this before. S.A Cosby writes books that have difficult topics, such as race, sexuality, religion, things of that nature. But, and both books contain a little bit of everything. You know what I mean? This story follows Titus Crown. He's the first Black sheriff in a very racist town, in my opinion. The town is racist. It's very divided. And he's a former FBI agent. Something traumatic happens in his past. He winds up moving back home. He becomes the sheriff of this small town in Virginia called Sharon County. In this small town, of course, everything seems like idyllic. Everything seems like everything is good. But of course, small towns, they have very deep and dark secrets. And that's what is happening in this book. A series of events happen. It starts off with a school shooting with a Black kid. And then, of course, you have the political narrative around that taking place in a town, like I said, that is very divided, very black and white. So you have that. And then that leads to them uncovering that there's actually a serial killer in this town. And just, oh my gosh, all of the things. There's just so much in this story. Trigger warning. There's sexual assault mentioned in this. And it's essay against children. I have to mention that, and I wish that I mentioned it in my first review of this book, but there's no mention of that on the back of this book. The synopsis is very short. You know how I like it. Short, sweet, and spicy. Yeah. So you don't get a lot of details, and I don't think that many people talk about it. If that's a spoiler for you, I do apologize, but I do think that it's worth mentioning, especially if you are interested in reading this book. It is a very good thriller. I guess it's considered like a crime thriller. It's really, really good, well written, like I mentioned before. And then, of course, we have Razorblade Tears, which seems to be a fan favorite amongst many. I feel like more people read this book than they have read All the Sinners Bleed. This story follows Ike Randolph and Buddy Lee Jenkins. They are the fathers of Derek and Isaiah. Their sons were married and are brutally murdered. They band together. They are ex-cons, but they band together to find out what the heck happened, who killed their sons, because the police ain't doing their jobs. Whatever they're doing, the trail is run cold. They're trying to figure out what's going on. This book was so good. Like I mentioned before, I didn't necessarily care for all the cussing, but if you are looking for something thrilling, action-packed, that has violence, that has conversations surrounding, you know, like I said, difficult topics, you'll definitely enjoy this book. I enjoyed it. You kind of just want to be on the edge of your seat and kind of just, let's get this thing going. This and All the Sinners Bleed for sure. And that is it for today's video. I think this video is probably going to be relatively lengthy, and I was hoping that it wouldn't be. I only wanted to keep your ear for a little bit, but the Mercy Thompson series really threw me for a loop. Trying to explain that world. Oh, that's what gets you about fantasy. But anyways, I do really hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sorry for disappearing again, but if you did make it this far into the video, I appreciate you for being here so much. I do, from the deepest parts of my heart. But I will catch you in the next one, God willing. Bye.